Welcome, everybody. This is the Vigilant news stream for today, December 1st, 2021. I'm Justin from Stillness in the Storm, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan from Underground News Wire. Ryan, how's it going?
Good. Always a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, we've got another update for you, everybody, today regarding the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. This is going to be on with a lot of intense references, we'll say, so keep the kids out of the room if you have any in there. And we'll be posting links in the description of the video. So the article that accompanies this video is in the description now. Before we get to that, I just want to thank everybody for your support. Go ahead and go to stillnessinthestorm.com/donate to support our work. We really need your support. Keeping journalism free and fair and even covering what needs to be covered is a hard thing to do, and we need your support to do that. So thanks so much for that. You can also support us by purchasing one of our products in the description. Ascent Nutrition is the one that I featured for today. You can find that in the description and the link for this video. You can also find it in the chat in Rumble if you're in there. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ryan. What have you got for us today from day 3?
Well, it is, as you just said, it was day 3 of a 6-week trial of the British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, who's been accused of sex trafficking minors. The first accuser, who we reported on yesterday, going by the pseudonym Jane, took the stand once again this morning at the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Jane testified yesterday, and we'll just do a little recap. She claimed that Ghislaine lured her into Epstein's orbit. She also claimed that while visiting the late financier's mansion in Palm Beach, Florida, Maxwell and Epstein led her upstairs to his bedroom where they took her clothes off. A quote from the accuser. "He asked me to take my top off. Then there were hands everywhere, and Jeffrey proceeded to masturbate again, and Ghislaine was like rubbing on him, kissing on him. During these incidents, this is the U.S. attorney. During these incidents, did Maxwell ever touch your body?" To which the accuser said yes. She also described group sex sessions taking place at Epstein's lavish home in the mid-1990s, when she and others, including Maxwell, would abruptly be summoned to his bedroom or a massage room. Her testimony goes into greater detail, and we'll throw a link into the description for you to check that out. But the theme seems to be that Ghislaine and Jeffrey would single out young girls who were on hard times. Family maybe went bankrupt, the dad's gone. They would shower them in gifts and give them special attention until eventually they were comfortable enough, and then they'd pounce. That seems to be the template for how they would, approach these girls and get them to do their, dirty business.
Right.
Maxwell's brother, Kevin, appeared in court today, and a sister of hers named Isabel was also present for the proceedings. Ghislaine's siblings have been supportive of her, even petitioning the United Nations to get her out on bail. The siblings were raised in luxury and children of publishing tycoon Robert Maxwell and his French-born wife Elizabeth, who was a Holocaust scholar. We found a pretty interesting picture of the family, which we'll have to post somewhere at some point for you guys. But so more of her family was there today. The day began with the defense, Laura Menninger, grilling the first accuser, attempting to poke holes in Jane, which is the pseudonym of the first accuser, poke holes in her claims that she came from a poor, broken family when Epstein and Maxwell allegedly began preying on her in '94. Jane, in yesterday's testimony, claimed that her family fell into bankruptcy after her dad died of leukemia, and that she lived in a pool house with her mother and siblings at the time she was drawn in by Maxwell and Epstein. The defense attorney Menninger challenged Jane over her testimony from the day prior regarding the first time she saw Maxwell without her clothes on. The alleged victim said that shortly after she was first abused by Epstein at the age of 14, he and Maxwell led her to his bedroom inside Palm Beach Mansion, moved her to the bed, and took her clothes off. When questioning Jane this morning, the defense said that in December 2019, you told the government that you do not have a specific memory of your first time with Ghislaine. You have come up with that memory in the last 2 years. Is that correct? She asked, to which Jane, the accuser, said, "I don't believe I've come up with the memory, no." So it seems like the defense is trying to get her into kind of like sabotaging herself without realizing it,
Right.
with how she answers these questions. During that cross-examination, Jane said that Jeffrey Epstein took her to Mar-a-Lago in the 1990s when she was a teenager to meet Donald Trump. The woman, identified by the pseudonym Jane, said Epstein drove her to Trump's Palm Beach estate in a dark green car when she was 14. She wasn't asked to describe the meeting. The defense attorney, Laura Menninger, then moved on to unrelated line of questioning, which I have my own theories about why that was, which we can get into shortly. Jane then mentioned another big name, Prince Andrew. She testified today that she remembered Prince Andrew being on the flights with her. The Duke of York has been under fire for his close ties to the late pedophile and is also facing a lawsuit from Virginia Roberts, who claims Epstein and Maxwell made her have sex with the UK royal 3 times, starting in 2001 when she was 17. It is important to note that Roberts' claims are not part of this trial. That's a totally separate thing. So they then adjourned for lunch. After lunch, the accuser testified again, mentioning that Epstein brought her to famed journalist Mike Wallace's 80th birthday party in New York, where she sang him happy birthday at the tender age of 15. Now, this Mike Wallace was 80 years old at the time.
Wow.
And maybe it was just all innocent, but, given the company, who knows? So, yeah, that's just another guy who hobnobbed with Epstein. Next up, the defense began to quiz the actress, this Jane, she was an actress, about the many plot lines she acted out over her decades-long career as a soap opera actress, which include being bullied, battling cancer, surviving a car crash, getting stalked, and taking down a drug cartel. When asked about her role as a prostitute, the accuser responded that it was not my favorite storyline. You're able to cry on command, Menninger prodded, to which the witness replied, not really. Jane later told U.S. Attorney Allison Moe that acting on television is not real. Testifying in federal court is. When asked about being awarded $5 million from an Epstein compensation fund, the accuser broke out into tears. She paused for about 30 seconds, wiped away her tears as the prosecutor asked what the money meant to her, to which she responded in a breaking voice, I wish I would never have received that money in the first place because of what happened. So the next witness to take the stand today was the first accuser, Jane's ex-boyfriend, a fellow actor going by the pseudonym Matt. The reason he was called to the stand was to relay what Jane had confided in him about Epstein over the course of their relationship. Matt described his girlfriend of 8 years as shaken, embarrassed, and horrified whenever she discussed the relationship with the late financier. She would say, Matt, the money wasn't effing free, but didn't go into more detail, he said, which was pretty much all that the boyfriend had to say. And then there was more that came out after that. I think the last person of the day to testify was, I don't know if we mentioned this in yesterday's report, but Epstein and Ghislaine met this first accuser at Interlochen in Michigan, which is like a music school.
Right.
So the last guy to take the stand before the end of the day was the executive something or other. His name's Daniel Besselson, who is the vice president of finance at Interlochen. He testified. Apparently, he said that Epstein was a big donor to the institution, bankrolling the Jeffrey Epstein Scholarship Lodge on its campus, which Interlochen is a pretty prestigious boarding school. I've always heard about it growing up in Michigan. Never seen it. Know a handful of people that went there. But yeah, it's big money, big stuff going on up there. It's not the first time I heard about Epstein and his philanthropy, I guess you would call it. Other colleges around, I think that's probably part of how he scouted a lot of folks.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that's about all we have new today.
Okay. Well, great report. It seemed like there's a lot of stuff happening. So before we get into any commentary, I did want to offer some commentary with respect to the psychological grooming that happens with these people and make an association with what the pilot had experienced. So I'm going to get into that in a moment. Before I do, I just want to show everybody the photo. I was doing this earlier, so I just wanted to point out some photos that we have. Apparently, these have started to come out somewhat recently, so I don't know where these photos are coming from, but this is apparently the Ghislaine Maxwell family, her siblings here. I'm assuming that these are her siblings here, possibly uncles and relatives. We have one, this guy, whoever this guy is, Scott Bergenson. I don't know exactly who he is in relation to all this, but
what a stance.
I know, seriously.
Power stance.
Needs to get his feet worked on. His feet are a little, got the duck walk going on. So this is a really old photo. This kind of reminds me of, like you were mentioning earlier, like a kind of secret society photo almost. Like,
yeah, they look like a bunch of vampires or warlocks.
Exactly. So we got Maxwell here in the top left, and then we have Ghislaine in the back middle. She looks almost like a young Winona Ryder. And yeah, I was, as you were talking about the father Maxwell, I was trying to remember some of the details from about a year ago when they started to emerge. But what I remember from that right now is that it appears as though Maxwell Sr. was a long-time black male purveyor, basically, that he was working with the upper echelons of society to use blackmail and the production of blackmail as a way to intimidate various people to conform to the globalist agenda.
That's right.
And so blackmail is a very prominent feature for, almost, as far as I can tell, almost every facet of the cabal, the New World Order, the banking families, you name it, like all of the bad guys that we like to name off, they basically use blackmail to keep everybody in check. And so, you know, it's no surprise that this network has been around for a long time, and even that there's a kind of family business in blackmail. So what Ghislaine Maxwell had to deal with as a child, it's uncertain. But if what I've researched with respect to how these things work is any validity, then there's plenty of abuse to go around in these families. So we should not think about people like Ghislaine and even potentially her father as total archetypes of evil. And they are themselves victims in some capacity. Not that we should just forgive them for what they've done either, but just to put that in context.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Actually, yeah, her dad had ties to Mossad, ties to the CIA, and you hit the nail on the head. He was gathering information on people until he suddenly died one night. And then it appears that Epstein and Ghislaine took over the family business.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, why is it that giving gifts and showering people with scholarships and clothes and all these things is important? Well, at a very deep psychological level, we are tribal social creatures. We're herd animals. Our body, our flesh is essentially a herd animal. And one of the ways that our psychosocial psychology in the midbrain works is that when we break bread together, when we exchange benefits, when I give you something that materially benefits your life, in your brain, in your mind, you place me in a position of trust now, even if I'm not necessarily a trustworthy person. So one of the reasons why pedophiles and groomers and all sorts of criminals use gifts and things like this is because at a very deep level that most people aren't even aware of, you feel this drive, this incentive for loyalty. Now, notice that they use the same basic program with the pilot. Remember, the pilot got, what, 45 acres and a mule? No, not the mule, but he got 45 acres of Epstein's ranch. And now one of the victims, Jane, was also the recipient of whatever, money, college funds, scholarship, all sorts of benefits, I'm sure. So that is part of the grooming technique. You want to make somebody feel as though they can trust you because you're meeting their needs. And then once you've got them on the hook, once they feel like, well, now I'm dependent on you to help me meet my needs for college or whatever, the likelihood that I'm going to keep your secrets is extremely high. And then you combine that with a little blackmail, and you've got a sandwich of compliance, basically. You're going to get all sorts of benefits. I'm going to give you all sorts of benefits. And if you violate my trust, me as the abuser, Epstein in this case, then I'm going to rain hell down upon you. I'm going to ruin your life. So it's these two extremes that create a very good psychological incentive for compliance, basically. And that's what we saw apparently with these victims. So,
yes, it seems like they're trying to catch this gal, this accuser, goofing up, similar to how the in the Rittenhouse trial when the guy just kind of like outed himself.
Right.
And yeah, they're trying to paint it like Ghislaine is some victim, which she is. You know, she was born into something that's most of us couldn't comprehend, and they're trying to make it seem like, you know, these victims knew what they were doing, which is also true to an extent, but that doesn't make it okay. And it doesn't mean that Ghislaine should go unpunished. And it definitely doesn't mean that we shouldn't take it as far as it can go and see who was on all of those flights. You know, just because someone, you know, is maybe a victim of their circumstances, it doesn't make it right. And we would like to see a justice system where, you know, the law is followed and, you know, due process happens, but we also want to see, you know, things taken as far as they can go. So
precisely. Yeah, 2 points I wanted to also throw in there is that with respect to the defense, the fact that the defense is essentially splitting hairs means that they have no defense. With respect to the law, in order, the burden of proof lays on the accuser. So the prosecutor has to create a really watertight case to get the ideally unanimous jury verdict that they want. What the defense is going to want to do if they know they don't have a defense is they're going to want to try to poke as many holes in that case as humanly possible, because all it takes is a reasonable doubt. Or they can poke so many holes that the trial could be declared a mistrial. And once it's a mistrial, it's a lot harder to move forward after the fact. So that's probably what the defense is trying to do. They're trying to poke holes in this case. Now, the fact that they don't really have a defense other than that, at least that we've seen. So we don't know, there might be something else coming with respect to the defense. The defense hasn't actually had a chance to present and argue their case yet. We're looking at the prosecution right now. But what we do know is that if that is their only defense, to poke holes, then that means that most likely we're dealing with a guilty individual. So if you can read in between the lines, we're dealing with a guilty individual most likely. As a point of comparison, the O.J. Simpson trial is a perfect example of this. Why did they have O.J. Simpson put on the glove? Because they knew it would be convincing to the jury that there would be reasonable doubt as to whether or not he actually wore the glove in the first place, even though anybody in their right mind who knew the mechanics of how the glove works would not want OJ to put on the glove because it was covered in blood and most likely got shrunk and changed its shape and orientation. So that's with respect to the defense. And I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but we had some interesting resignations that happened in the past couple of days too. Is that right?
We did, yeah. There are people saying that it's more than a coincidence that it happened on the first day of Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. But I mean, you know, it's only speculation at this point. We had Jack Dorsey step down. I think the CEO of Walmart stepped down, and there was one more. I don't remember. I mean, I could find out really quick. I think,
sure. While you do that, you know, when I think one of the things that I think is interesting about this is the cabal are not stupid. You know, they make stupid mistakes for sure, but they employ contingency planning, just like any well-honed military apparatus does. So the military, when they're coming with their O plans, they ensure that that they consider all possibilities and they come up with a contingency plan to deal with every possibility. The cabal does the exact same thing. So what does that have to do with the resignations that we're seeing? Well, if I was a cabal member, I'm trying to do strategic planning to figure out how we're going to deal with this fallout. If Ghislaine actually has some damning information, then I'm going to want to make sure that I've already taken steps to shield the impact from that. Twitter, Jack Dorsey steps down. The new CEO apparently bans images or makes it very difficult for people to share images. Does that mean, yeah, so
had some racist tweets in the past also.
Right. So I think that there's a case to be made for the fact that the movements we're seeing at the higher levels of big tech and other areas of the cabal we might not be able to see right now indicates that they are very threatened by this trial, and there might be good things coming.
I did find out who it was the CEO of CNBC.
Oh, interesting.
So not a small time, small fry. But I did want to add, like when we were comparing to O.J. Simpson, another thing to consider with this case is that these people, it was their job to get blackmail on the people in the highest offices of government, the Justice Department, celebrities. So if this goes through without a hitch, it would be kind of a miracle because, we have a president who is 1 or 2 degrees away of separation from Epstein himself. We have people throughout our whole government that are, could be, 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from people that were in the little black book. And we also have this whole trial just infested with Democrats. You have them on the prosecution, you have them as the judge, and also the defense. So, it would be a Christmas miracle if justice was served in the way that it should be. But again, it's only the third day, so
Precisely.
We'll have to see where it goes.
Yeah, great point. And one last thing I'll say, and then I'm pretty much done. I'll turn it back to you for any final thoughts. I think let's assume that this is going to potentially be a nothing burger. And what I mean by nothing burger is that we're not going to see any big names drop. We're not going to see, maybe even Ghislaine will get off, so it might seem like nothing's happening. Well, this is not a loss necessarily, because think about what happened with respect to the election last year. The election didn't go the way we were all thinking and wanted, but what it did is it revealed corruption at a massive, massive level. And now there's a lot more people who are skeptical of the mainstream narrative, we'll say. So if the same basic thing happens here, if this is yet another example of a travesty of injustice, then that will itself create yet another event in the deep mind of the individual and the collective that, wait a minute, the seeming all just and perfect reality we've been sold is not, and there's corruption way deeper than we could possibly imagine. And that is a good thing. That is a victory. So I just want to throw that out there. Any final thoughts or commentary?
I think what you just said is absolutely correct. I think that with each, upset comes more and more people that are just getting sick of it. And, we're willing to raise a stink about it. And that's what we need. So even if it is a dud, and I'm not trying to be like black pill, naysayer, because I would like to see, some unexpected twists and turns in this trial. But even if that doesn't happen, it's gonna infuriate people on both sides of the political aisle, and that's what we need. So
precisely. Well, great, Ryan. Thanks so much for your coverage. And if you all want to see the article for this, go ahead and check the description. Really appreciate that, and we'll have more coverage for you tomorrow. And one last thing I'll say is that part of what we want to do with Vigilant News and what we've been doing for years is to try to give a way to understand the positive benefit, the positive spiritual benefits of these things. And as I often like to say, no matter what happens in life, the game is always rigged for spiritual growth. We always have an opportunity to grow spiritually and to help expand the awakening, even though it might not seem like it. And I don't think God or the higher forces are taking a day off and by any means with all this. So thanks so much for watching and tuning in. Please, if you haven't already, go to the description and look for Subscribe Star or the donation page. We could really appreciate your support. It takes a lot of time and energy to put these things together, and your support is greatly appreciated, even if it's only a cup of coffee. And with that, thank you so much. We'll catch you on the flip side. Take care, everybody.